Okay, hello. I see some familiar faces from handing out those keys. Has anyone lost them yet? No? Wow. Nice, impressive. So, as you heard, my name is Kiersten Kral. I have been a staff member here at RYLA for 9 years, and I actually attended in 2015 as a conferee, so just like you are all today. Today, I will be sharing about my ongoing recovery through a brain injury with post-concussion syndrome, dysautonomia, and migraine disease, and how it has changed my perspective. I am 25 years old now, but I sustained the concussion as a senior in high school when I collapsed towards the end of an indoor track race. It caused a multitude of symptoms and put me out of school for 7 weeks. When I was able to re-enter, I had to alternate between full and half days with a lot of accommodations in place. I have yet to be able to attend college and am still in rehab and continue to experience the symptoms of my injury every single day. As a 17-year-old, you begin to envision a future with a mere idea of what you'd like to do and who you want to be. For me, that meant becoming a veterinarian and continuing my running career. I had chosen a college that offered me a balance of both, and the dream was taking form until it wasn't. You see, in our visions lie unexpected outcomes, and January 14th, 2017 was the day that completely shifted my reality. But perceiving it as good or bad rested in the power of my own eyes. Today, I hope to teach you what it means to live instead of simply being alive. I am going to play a 15-minute video detailing parts of my recovery, as well as some educational awareness, because it would feel pretty disingenuous to tell you what I have experienced without explaining why. And because prior to this concussion, no one had ever educated me on what a concussion was or how to properly treat it. A PDF link is included in the schedule underneath my name with a QR code, so if you are interested in looking that up afterwards, if there was something that you weren't so clear on, everything I cover in this video will be in that PDF link. After this video, I will be back on stage to talk to you, and I have a little bit of true or false for you guys to do after this.
When I opened my eyes, after laying blacked out for a couple of seconds, I entered an unfamiliar world, cloaked in fake familiarity.
I'd asked you if you could stand up, and you thought you totally could, and you're like, yeah, I don't feel too bad. Doctor had to catch you, and if he didn't catch you, you would have fallen down.
The day I hit my head, my friends lost me. I have survived 100% of my worst days. So much of this journey is on my own. You know, we're all on a path of not knowing, and it just happens to be that my path has a lot of not knowing and uncertainty, and I just have to go with it. And life is so tragically beautiful and amazing, and words can't really be used to describe certain things. And I was like, I'm trying. She's like, no, you're not trying, you're doing. And I was like, you know what, you're right, I am doing. So here's the doing. But I don't understand why your level of joy after success has to correlate to how big that success was. 1.28 miles in 26 minutes, and that is the farthest and the longest I have walked in 4 years. Growth comes when you're uncomfortable. And I was uncomfortable when I was dizzy. Sometimes it's so incredibly difficult to be able to see my dreams clearly. It's so incredibly difficult to think that they will ever become my reality. Reading for 8 minutes is such an easy thing for most people to do. I've got a lot of dreams, man, and I've got a lot of plans, and I'm going to do them. For over 7 years, I've experienced a constant stream of symptoms and limitations. This meant I could give up and let it consume me, or shift my perspective and learn to build upon this new foundation. I chose the latter. Trying to live life with this brain and body has been quite difficult. I experience a wide range of symptoms, from a constant headache since the day of my injury, dizziness, fatigue, eye and neck pain, blood pooling, low stimuli tolerance, and many more. It took me 6 years to have enough tolerance to experience any sort of life outside of my house and doctor's appointments. Even though these outings come with discomfort, and I have to use a wide range of management tools to do them, I feel very grateful since I've become so very familiar with isolation. Things like walking, standing, talking, reading, being in the car, lights, sounds, along with many others, provoke an increase in symptoms. Early on, these high level of sensations and sensitivities kept me from barely leaving my room. To start understanding the complexities of recovery, I'd like to define a concussion. As a disclaimer, though, this following section is not medical advice. Nothing I say here replaces a medical professional, so please use at your own discretion. So, a concussion is a form of traumatic brain injury and is the result of an acceleration and deceleration of the brain, causing injury to the neurons and disruption to the electrical signals, which leads to symptoms. It takes the brain about 3 to 6 weeks to fully recover metabolically, but symptoms can persist for longer than that. And when one or more symptoms last beyond 3 months, it is known as post-concussion syndrome, or persistent post-concussive symptoms, also known as PCS. Symptoms of a concussion can vary from headache to nausea, dizziness, anxiety, and many, many more. These symptoms, well, they can fall under one or all of the 7 different areas. They are as follows: the autonomics, headache, vestibular, cervical, oculomotor, emotional, and or cognitive. There might be a few unfamiliar terms in there, like autonomics, vestibular, and oculomotor. So let's talk about them. First, the autonomics refers to the autonomic nervous system, which controls the things we don't have to think about, like blood pressure, heart and breathing rates, body temperature, digestion, and so on. There are 2 branches, known as parasympathetic and sympathetic. When you hear parasympathetic, think of calm, non-threatening situations. Rest and digest, because it slows down your heart rate and aids in digestion. The sympathetic branch is associated with fight, flight, freeze, because it's more active during danger, stress, and physical activity. A fast heart rate, sweaty palms, and butterflies are all signs your sympathetic nervous system is more activated. These branches act very much like a seesaw because they are always working together to create a balance for what you need in the moment. But after brain injury or periods of chronic stress or illness, shifting back into that relaxing state can become more difficult. Your brain can begin to perceive danger at inappropriate times. So, learning how to regulate your nervous system with things like deep breathing or shaking your body out is important in building back that elasticity and managing life stressors in general. A dysfunction within this system is known as dysautonomia. It can present itself after brain injury, virus, or an underlying genetic condition like EDS. People may experience a wide range of symptoms, like dizziness with postural changes, fast or slow heart rate, and blood pooling, which can make things like standing or warm weather difficult. Next, the vestibular system, which is your balance system. It provides your brain with information about motion, head position, and where we are in space. Then, it signals your muscles to respond accordingly. It involves your eyes, inner ear, and touch, which is known as proprioception. When there is a miscommunication or dysfunction within this system, one could feel unsteady, floaty, or experience motion sickness. It can make simple things symptom-provoking, like uneven surfaces, reaching for a cup in a cabinet, or elevators and being in water, which are a few of my personal experiences. And lastly, the oculomotor category has to do with your vision and how your eyes are able to work together, track an object, and see depth. If you have a deficit in this area, you might think objects are closer or further than they actually are. You might have difficulty reading or even experience visual distortions. In order to regain proper functioning after brain injury, the brain undergoes neuroplasticity. This is when it tries to rewire itself by building new neural pathways, using other pathways to bypass broken connections, and or making new neurons. Neuroplasticity simply means the brain is changing, think sprouting and rerouting. While it happens automatically, like when learning something new, we can enact these changes by performing repetitive actions, just like you would by lifting weights to build muscle. Concussion rehab, you see, is dependent on the areas affected and can be in combination of more than one therapy, like vision and vestibular therapy, as well as autonomic retraining and pain reprocessing therapy. The range of practitioners that could be used to direct this recovery can be a sports medicine doctor, a physical therapist, functional neurologist, but ultimately, it might take a team. When you are looking for a provider, it's imperative that this practitioner is up to date on concussion protocol because far too many people have been misled, misunderstood, and unfortunately misdiagnosed. A trained physician or certified athletic trainer should be able to diagnose a concussion by the following: a mechanism of injury, so if there was a hit or a fall, presence of symptoms, and tests like eye tracking, balancing, memory, and reaction time. If you suspect a concussion, you should get in with a concussion literate provider as soon as you can because they will set you on track for following a concussion protocol. An urgent care or ER will be able to rule out life-threatening risks, so it's not a bad idea to check one of those out immediately after a head injury, especially if there is prolonged unconsciousness and confusion. If you experience any sudden changes in symptoms following a head injury, like a severe increase in headache, vision changes, slurred speech, get to the ER. If you suspect a concussion during sport, sit out. Symptoms may not occur right away, and after injury, your brain enters an energy deficit, which makes you really susceptible to a second concussion, which increases the probability for prolonged recovery, and in rare cases, can be fatal. Remember that your health is way more important than any sport, so please make sure you listen to your body and take the time needed to recover. The last topic I would like to touch on is migraine disease because it's very stigmatized and is not the same as a headache. It is a complex neurological disease with the root cause believed to be genetics. It causes sensitization of the nervous system, and there are over 30 associated symptoms, which can be extremely debilitating, occurring at different phases of an attack. These symptoms can range from pain to numbness, difficulty speaking, light sensitivity, and so on. You hear me saying migraine without an S because migraines can suggest a series of isolated incidents rather than a chronic condition. You see, people who experience migraine disease experience migraine attacks, but someone may use these words interchangeably. Like many conditions, migraine lays on a spectrum, and some may experience a few attacks a year, while others may have chronic or daily attacks. While there is no cure, you can go from chronic to episodic and even into remission. Migraine disease, like vestibular dysfunction and dysautonomia, can have different types of diagnoses, as you see here, with 3PD in vestibular dysfunction and POTS under dysautonomia. When it comes to treatments for all these conditions, it can range from medications to lifestyle changes. There are management aids that overlap, like exercise and cognitive behavioral therapy, but also specific ones like the neuromodulation devices for migraine and a high-salt diet for dysautonomia. Treatment-wise for me, changes throughout the years depending on what my body needs, can tolerate, and what our primary focus is. I work with a team in order to cover all the dysfunctions and do many different forms of rehab, while also using a combination of medications to manage migraine and dysautonomia. I help manage these conditions in multiple ways, though. A few of these tools are trekking poles for walking, compression socks, a weighted blanket, and trying to pace activities throughout the day. Taking care of my body has turned into a full-time job, and every day consists of working towards my recovery. Maybe I do more of a calculated rehab, like vestibular and vision therapy. Or heart rate-based training on the stationary bike. A lot of times, it's the things that go unmeasured, the constant check-ins, messages of safety. You'd think there'd be time off, but the only space that feels to exist measures the weeks between Botox appointments or infusions. I am constantly putting myself into the space of discomfort in the name of recovery and simply living. But I've been learning how to react differently towards the symptoms and uncovering my subconscious fears. Pain reprocessing therapy and somatic tracking, as it's called. Managing these symptoms requires a lot of tools, as you saw, but I've become pretty good at being prepared. Always carrying my bag with medications, Gammacore, which I do 6 times a day, and Cephaly at least once. Nonetheless, having a dynamic disability can become exhausting and overwhelming, as it's never ending. So, I try to find the balance. I'd like to say that many disabilities are invisible, inconsistent, and unpredictable. I'd also like to point out that the disability community is one that anyone can join, which is why advocacy and supportive accessibility is very important. Disability isn't a bad word, and it doesn't automatically equate with being an inspiration. Those qualities don't come with a diagnosis. It's just how one chooses to live. While recovery is a lot of mindset and hard work, it's also luck and privilege. I want to recognize that I'm privileged to have access to the medical care and family friend support that I do. And lastly, I want you to remember that every brain injury, illness, and recovery is different from one another. What may work for someone may not help another, and specific symptoms can express themselves differently in each person. Just how everyone's path in life leaves their own unique footprint. So now, first, I would like to thank you for your attention, for watching that video. I'd like to do just a little bit of an activity with you. I'm going to show you about 10 statements up here regarding concussion. This information might have been covered in the video. It might not have been.
But what I want you to do is, I'll give you about a minute or so, not very long, to work together and you guys decide whether it's true or false. Okay, so we will sit and we'll do a thumbs up or thumbs down. One thing I do want to say is don't be afraid to be wrong. This is when we learn the most, you know what I mean? So, first statement is an MRI is needed to diagnose a concussion. True or false? I've seen a lot of false. You are right. So an MRI only picks up on significant damage, and a concussion is a functional injury. Number 2, you can continue to recover from a concussion, even after many years. I see lots of trues. You are right. With the right interventions, improvements in symptoms can be possible even after several years, but of course it is person-dependent. Third one, you do not need to lose consciousness to sustain a concussion. I see some trues and I see a few falses as well. So this one is true. Only about 10% of people who experience a concussion will also experience a loss of consciousness. So it is not a necessity to be diagnosed with concussion. So 4, concussions are treated with strict rest. I see a lot of thumbs down. False. As you saw before, there's a combination of resources that are used to treat concussions. It used to be thought that they were treated by just shutting yourself in a dark room and resting and not doing anything. That was the protocol from doctors, but as science has evolved and people have learned, they realized that you do need specific rehab. And actually what they do say is the first 48 hours, you do want to limit some cognitive and physical activity. You don't want to be taking any big tests. You don't want to be participating in any sort of sport. But after that 48-hour period, it is recommended that you can do some gentle walking or any sort of gentle exercises that does not increase your symptoms that much because it can help in recovery. So neck injuries, whiplash, and concussions can mimic each other. I see some truths. I see some truths. Okay, it is true. So the reason being is that in your neck, you've got these nerves that are involved in proprioceptive input, which we talked about in the vestibular system, which help tell you where you are in space. And if you experience a concussion, it is likely that you also experience whiplash because a concussion occurs at around 70 to 160 Gs of force, and a whiplash only needs about 4.5 Gs of force. Number 6, you do not need a direct hit to get a concussion. See a lot of truths. See some iffies. All right. It's true. So anything that can cause an acceleration and deceleration of the brain may result in a concussion. But I also do want to emphasize that not every bump, jostle, or shake is a concussion. You don't need to be walking around afraid that you're just going to get a concussion if someone knocks into you or if you fall. It does take a lot of force to get a concussion. This is two-parter. Symptoms occur directly after injury, and once your symptoms are resolved, your concussion is too. Wow, pretty quick. A lot of people are saying false. The answer is false. So while symptoms can occur directly after injury, it may take up to 48 hours for them to be present. And as I said earlier in the video, it takes the brain about 3 to 6 weeks to recover metabolically, regardless if symptoms are present or not. So you may get a concussion and feel perfectly fine after like 5 days, but your brain is still recovering after that energy deficit. And number 8, you do not need to wake someone every 30 minutes during the night after a concussion. I see some trues and I see some falses. Okay, so this one is true. But it is important to monitor the concussed person for any signs of emergency. This one, like the one with resting in a dark room, was protocol for concussion. They would say, make sure you wake that person up every 30 minutes, make sure they're okay. But now, again, as we've learned, it's best to let that person rest, let that person's brain recover some, but you do need to keep an eye out if there are any signs of emergency. So number 9, you must avoid all screens after injury. I see some falses And I see some truths for this one. This one is false. So it is important to limit a lot of stimulation and cognitive effort for the first 48 hours, but afterwards it is all threshold based. So screens are not bad, being on your phone is not bad, reading, watching TV, none of that is bad or harmful. It's just based on how much your symptoms increase. So say you got a concussion and you're on your phone and you had like a level 3 headache, right? And say it went up to a level 8 headache, you want to take a break before it reaches that high. And that's just how it's going to be with a lot of things like that. But just because something increases your symptoms, like screens, for example, it does not mean it is harmful. And lastly, number 10, helmets do not prevent concussions. We have some truths and we have some falses. This one is true. So because a concussion is what happens when your brain accelerates and then quickly decelerates, or the opposite way, helmets are not going to prevent your brain from moving inside your skull, but they 100% will help prevent any sort of serious skull fracture, or at least help prevent that. So please keep wearing your helmets when you are skiing or snowboarding or riding your bike or on skateboards. They will help you from hopefully cracking your head open if you happen to fall. Okay, so that is 10 quick true or falses. You guys did really well with that. Unplug this. We're going to move into a little bit more of a speaking part. A little closer. So, being that we just played true or false, one of the obvious truths in my life is that it totally flipped upside down. And it actually took me a while to realize it. So, after starting vestibular and neuro-optometric rehab in June of 2017, so my injury was in January of 2017, I had to get through school, and then I started my rehab in June of 2017. After starting that, I had to stop after 6 months because instead of getting better, I had gotten significantly worse. So we dove into migraine treatment. I got prism lenses to help with my vision, and I began riding the stationary bike. What I thought would be 8 weeks of therapy and then back to normal life has turned into 7+ years and counting. So celebrating the seemingly small wins along the way has acted as momentum. Before I could ride 45 minutes on a stationary bike, I could only ride for 2. And before I could read a book for a few sets of 6 minutes, I could only read for 30 seconds. And that 30 seconds came with about 20 minutes of like complete shut-eye afterwards because my eyes were so fatigued from just that little bit. Being able to watch a 40-minute show or go on a 15-minute walk without being completely incapacitated by it are huge feats. I used to be unable to tolerate a hug or someone sitting on a bed next to me because of the motion and extreme dizziness I felt from it. I couldn't be handed something or make eye contact without being lightheaded. There were times when a 15-minute conversation with a friend would knock me down for days. And there were days where I could barely even speak to my parents, let alone get out of bed. I couldn't even walk into a store for the first 5 years. And when I did try, I ended up on the floor, incredibly lightheaded and flared with symptoms for days afterwards. I had realized that my brain was just not yet able to handle the depth, the lights, the visual busyness, simply standing there, and the short 5-minute car ride it took to get there and get back. But since then, I have definitely seen improvement. But still, nearly every aspect and activity of my life is dependent on what I can tolerate in that moment. And everything just has a toll on my brain's battery level. I still struggle to go more than 45 minutes in a car as a passenger without a break, socialize how I would like to, and even speak to you all today without feeling a flare in symptoms. But I am getting me back. And that is, I'm already gonna get emotional, and that is one of the most beautiful things ever, because for the longest time, I couldn't be me. I couldn't feel all the things I wanted to feel. I couldn't express myself. Even just simply like smiling could hurt. So I'm getting me back, and it is a really, really beautiful thing. You see, sometimes just getting to where you want to be takes a while. And sometimes it feels near impossible. But if you keep showing up, you might just see progress, no matter how slow that may be. And even if you have a long way to go, as I do, the now is still worth celebrating. I've realized this journey is basically a large paint-by-number picture, and all I have to do is keep picking up my paintbrush. Throughout the years, I see how this painting has changed, and how the way I present it has changed. I have gotten so used to living with these symptoms, hiding them behind a smile and viewing it with a positive perspective, that it can widen the opportunity of misunderstanding. But I also find myself feeling guilty for expressing the difficulties, so I struggle to know in which light I should paint. There's a balancing act of living with an invisible illness. Sharing the improvement is backed in fear of not being seen. Worries can follow after I post a photo of myself appearing fine. Comments like, "You look great, you are doing so well," are faced with a sense of defensiveness and just an urge to say, like, "I know I look fine, but I feel so far from it." I think there's actually a really odd balance in advocacy and transparency on one side, and a dismissal of others' assumptions on the other side. There's a side that wants to showcase everything that cannot be seen, and a side that is just simply tired of fighting to be seen. As the years go on, I learn more and more how to grapple with it all. But I believe it's a common experience across all people, to one extent or another. I do think infinite pieces of our lives are shared across the world, but ultimately, it is singularly our own. We are the only ones who know the exact meaning behind each letter we write, and that is one of the challenging beauties of our lives. But when we share it, people can relate and connect in their own ways. So I reckon we should use our vulnerability to showcase our story in a way that lights someone else's path and lets the lonely feel less alone. I know it may feel as if your story is invisible sometimes, but there will always be people with similar punctuation in similar places writing similar paragraphs. Let it be known, though, that it can be really easy to assume the reality of others based on their appearance or what they're doing. By doing so, we immediately take the pen out of their hand and begin to write their story that we know nothing about. We must act with kindness, compassion, forgiveness, and a willingness to listen, because we simply cannot assume the reality of others. As recovery is not linear, so too are the uncertainties of life, and I've had to learn to be acquainted with it and walk hand in hand with change. If you can believe it, there have been a lot of perspective changes in my life. One of the more recent ones is learning how to coexist with my body. Since I'm at a point in recovery where I'm experiencing more life things versus only symptoms and only doctors and only my bedroom, I've really had to focus on listening to my body. Figuring out how to live with the limitations, testing the boundaries, and trying not to let a single narrative write my future. I'd be lying if I didn't say there were periods where I found myself in a lot of doubt. Moments of, this will be mine forever. I use the words if, not when. Like, if I get better, if I can do that. And I was using it in a way where it was putting a cap on possibilities because it felt incredibly difficult to see a future of less symptoms. I haven't totally ruled out the ifs because uncertainty is a factor always, but it certainly holds a different tone now. Because up until about 2 years ago, I didn't feel as if I could achieve certain things or really much of anything without being completely symptom-free. That's where learning how to live with the symptoms comes in. But like anyone else, I still face doubts and fears. Working through these moments involves recognizing that those thoughts are there. Then you can ask yourself how you can change that narrative into something that feels more supportive. So saying something like, even though I am experiencing these doubts and difficulties right now, I know things can change later, sounds so much better than, I will never get through this, this is my forever. The mindset of, why can't I, helps reinforce this positive shift. We are given these limitless minds. Why would we put a definitive end on an infinite line? Once we feel that crack of hope and slowly see evidence of change, the strength to believe gets that much stronger. I think what's cool, though, is hope can exist independently. You can have everything pinned against you, yet still have faith in a way out. You can choose to create your own light while in a pit of darkness, and knowing this gives you all the power. It does not mean hope is easy, but it sure is possible. And honestly, it's okay for things to be scary or filled with doubt. Let's think about setting dreams. So when you set goals that reach outside of your comfort zone, everything is terrifying. Everything feels too big, too threatening, too much of a drop if you are to fall. But I don't think the people who reach those heights do it unafraid. They do it with fright coursing through their veins and doubts pushing to make their way to the front of the crowded mind. They take those feelings as a right of way, as a gift only given to those who dared. They set forth on a path where they've never been before, because at the end of the day, those who try never actually fail. What you begin to realize is, each step along the way is an experience you wouldn't have had you not dared to seek discomfort. Where we harness this power to create our own truth and change our reality begins in our ability to sit in the seat of awareness, to be the gatekeeper and watcher of our thoughts. But there are emotions in this dance of life that are uncomfortable to feel, and ones we probably like to ignore, honestly. I think sometimes we try to keep our mind occupied and stimulated because we are afraid to feel these sensations. But there is room for them. For sadness, grief, anxiety, frustration, pain, anger. We must recognize that feeling them does not make us weak. And it doesn't mean that we're giving in or feeding their power. To simply notice them or explore their origin and characteristics is where we can learn to move with them or through them. It's where we can create a level of safety and cultivate growth, presence, gratitude, confidence. You see, our mind is our home. We don't always have a say on who knocks on the door, but we do have some power in how they pass through. So if we were to look at emotions as if they were characters or people, we might begin to view their presence in our home, our mind, as something we can guide. For example, doubt and negativity, they show up and walk right in through the front door. I thank them for showing up, maybe ask some questions, explore what sent them an invitation, but then I show them the back door to leave. Sometimes they linger, but I try not to hold on to their presence or let their occupancy in my home feel like an invasion, because I know that they are just trying to help. I ask confidence to stay for tea, absorbing their unbreakable energy, and invite curiosity for dinner, listening intently to the intricate flow of ideas, allowing my mind space to expand. I hug sadness and dance with happiness. I breathe with frustration and anger and speak fear. Ultimately, if I take the seat of awareness, like I mentioned before, I am able to allow all these emotions and sensations to exist, while simultaneously choosing the ones I'd like to spend more time with. And the ones I put more focus on, like compassion and positivity, the more they show up in my home, and therefore, my life. But another important key to indulging in the beauty of life is presence. So much time is spent with the past and future that we miss the present in its most authentic space. It's really easy to spend the now thinking about the future, what we have to do, where we need to go. But when we do that, we forget to admire the life that's unfolding around us. What could have been crisp memories become faded into the background. You see, the past can try to guide us, and the future can try to drive us. But only the present moment will nurture the action. What's your biggest regret prior to your injury? I'm often asked. My answer would be not recognizing the worth of a moment before it became a memory. My younger self didn't live each day like it was her last because she always thought that there would be a next time, that there would be a next season or a next year and a next race, but that's just not how it worked out. You know, if I had known my ability to do things would be taken away and that I wouldn't be able to experience life without layers of symptoms, I would have held on to the sensations of what it felt like to be living, not just alive. In order to do that, I've had to learn a few things. I learned that life is painted by the difference of beauty and pain, but it is everything in between. The magic of the journey is uncovered in the many different textures and colors, so I've come to embrace my story as the masterpiece it is, and you should too. I learned that joy isn't based on external factors. It's something we must recognize and cultivate. I learned that there is so much light, even amongst the most difficult of times, and if we don't purposely view life as such, we will get swallowed by the darkness. I learned you can be grateful by choice and not just circumstance. In order to grow, I had to find peace within the pain and comfort within the unknown. I had to learn the true power of positivity and the humbling act of patience, which allows me to persevere like flowers that grow through the thickest of concrete. I learned to dance on whatever floor may be beneath me, because life itself is simply just a dance. And when you dance, you don't try to get to a place in the room, but you dance to enjoy the tune. I also learned to give myself permission to feel lost. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I encourage you to feel a little lost because it's an opportunity to find yourself and create plans that wouldn't have existed in other realities. I learned to own my own truth, reshape my idea of identity, and understand that I am not just a label in a color-coordinating filing system. Although it can be easy to feel as if I am defined by or obligated to the tabs I fall into. It can be really difficult to lose, even temporarily, a label I once identified with, like runner. But the last 7.5 years have allowed me to see that I am more than that, and that these labels are meant to be evolutionary. Gosh, I would say that this journey has not been easy, but amongst the rough weather of ever-changing skies, I hold so much gratitude. I am in awe of its raw beauty, with rains of uncertainty glistening with drops of hope, thunders of new identities and burials of old ones. Wind-cleared fields now lay for seeds of redesigned dreams to be planted. But my ability to see these rainbows and dance with the storm is no different than yours. I am not an anomaly. We all harness this power to live in positivity. So the following is a story I once heard, and then a poem I wrote. So it is a story of little Grasshopper and his master in a temple a long time ago. Grasshopper had to be trained in the deep parts of Buddhism. During training, the master took little Grasshopper into the back of the temple into a room which was usually kept locked, and asked Grasshopper what he saw. Grasshopper said, "I see a pool." "But what else do you see?" said Master. "Go closer, but don't get too close." Grasshopper slowly edged towards the pool. His eyes widened. He said, "I see bones in the bottom of the pool." But Grasshopper also saw a plank of wood stretching from one end of the pool to the other. The master explained that that is not water, but concentrated acid, and those bones are from little novices like him who fell In 7 days, said the master, you will have to walk across that plank as part of the test. He then brought Grasshopper outside to the courtyard, where there was another plank of wood, exactly the same length, width, and thickness as the one over the pool, but this one was suspended 2 feet above the ground on 2 bricks. Grasshopper began practicing, and after just half a day, he could run across that plank. He could do it blindfolded and backwards and even dance across it. After 7 days, the master brought him back into the room to the plank, suspended over the pool of acid, and told him to walk. Grasshopper could see the bones on the bottom, and as he walked, he wasn't as steady as he was in the courtyard. His knees started to shake a bit, and then he began to sway. You know what happened? I'm going to tell you. But in the meantime, I am going to share my poem. So, I want to ask you who you are. But I'm afraid this question wouldn't take us far. We are born to feel as if we need a title. We grow up being asked what we want to be and are expected to say anything except, I want to just be me. A doctor, a writer, a teacher, an artist, a one-word answer is what society expects. But what if I told you the possibilities were limitless? You see, we are not solely defined by the job we choose to pursue. It's like society wrote us a deadline and told us when the definition of who we are is due. But who we are is composed of a million things. It's like within us is a universe and all that it brings. It's unaligned, undefined, and most importantly, unconfined throughout all of mankind. Maybe it's the thoughts we think, both consciously and unconsciously, and our response to our environment as it's forever changing, both horrendously and beautifully. Or our journeys through the unexpected experiences and the way we live our life. Our expressions through honesty, empathy, and vulnerability, or the impact we have on those around us. Maybe it's the things that go undiscussed, like our scars that tell the stories of our battle through familiar and untouched territories. But maybe, just maybe, we are everything intertwined like the title of a book yet to be assigned, and a storyline not yet defined. But there are people who believe that they don't have a choice in life, and they couldn't be farther from the truth. We do indeed live in an uncontrollable world where tomorrow is not guaranteed, but within the unpredictable, our perspective is controllable. It's how we choose to see the world when suddenly flooded with anger and hate. It's our attitude when we wake and our ability to open-mindedly communicate. To agree to disagree, yet continue to fight for what's right. To smile in the darkness and continue to hope that one day we will find the light. To be grateful when we have nothing and patient when we want something. Circumstances of the day may not portray what we assume, but we can choose the rhythm of our sway when the wind beckons in the opposite way. This ability to realize a choice gives us a voice within the unheard and a will that cannot be deterred. I don't know if you know this, but it's proven that thought alone can alter the brain because neurons that fire together wire together. So it is up to you to decide how you want to change. We must become the best versions of ourselves rather than always trying to be better than someone else. I reckon we must be rich in life, but this does not live in money status. We must be rich with feelings and experience. It's about how much you laughed and loved and all the times you failed but rose above. It's all the days you chose to heal from the things you did not want to feel and the endless lessons you once learned that now tell you where to turn. It's how much of the world you welcomed within and how much to the world you breathlessly chose to give. For all that is priceless. Listen, life isn't easy. It will knock you down and leave you bleeding. You can choose to give up or choose to keep on believing. Yet we all experience life in a different way. So while I say you have an option to choose your happiness, for many that task is simply the utmost hardest. Depression and anxiety can quietly creep in silence, which is why I want to shed a light on those fighting mental illness. Although I cannot take away all the discomfort you feel, I know that there is happiness, love, and light already within you. Sometimes it just gets buried beneath the weight of what you're going through. Your symptoms may manifest in secret, but I know they are real, for you are not invisible and you are not alone, and you are more than a diagnosis on a piece of paper that makes you feel like being loved is conditional. I promise you, we all deserve love. It's a fact written in stone. So don't count yourself out or belittle your life. Don't make yourself smaller because they say you're too bright. And to those who try to dim their own flame, you are worthy of space, you matter, and the world with you in it is surely much brighter. Listen, life can be so short, yet so vast. So we must find our why, the reason behind our words, and the cause of the wind beneath our wings as we try to fly. This is living with intention instead of living just to die. But unfortunately, not many people are living while they're alive. And to their grave, they carry regret of all the things they didn't do because they chose to allow their what-ifs and doubts become a threat and let life slip right through. So, why do you exist? If you search for a purpose, would that be a guide for something you can provide, or is it a never-ending mission with nothing external to find? For maybe the meaning of life has always been just to be, but you need to be the one to decide what that exactly means. Our power is hidden within those limitless confines. There are no real fine lines, guidelines telling you who or how or why to be. You see, that word me is created from cultivating your own reality, and together we can make a difference. But even as one, you are far from powerless. Get this. One seed can grow one flower, but from that flower can grow multiple seeds, and those multiple seeds can grow into multiple flowers. It's as simple as cause and effect, and before you know it, your impact will triple. Just how one drop in the ocean is all it takes to create a ripple. You must see that our space is constantly filled by the energy we unknowingly release. If we remember to discard the negativity and share the compassion and kindness of loving peace, we can move together collectively. We all have our differences. Society puts emphasis on what we believe in, our gender orientation, and the color of our skin, but there are a million things that beautifully shape us into individuals. If we respect them, they do not form division, and if we perfect them, we allow society to make the decision of how we are envisioned. Being different brings unmatched textures into existence, so I want you to embrace your individuality. Take down your mask and face reality. But I want you to put down your paintbrush as well. Stop painting judgment on others, for it is not up to you to determine their colors. It's scary to be you, but you are the only you, and I swear that is true. So continue to chase after the dreams that were denied. Walk through the world with your mind open wide. And always, always harness your authentic truth with pride. So, prior to reading that poem, I left off asking if you knew what happened to little Grasshopper as he struggled to walk across that plank. Well, he fell in. You know what the master did? He laughed. Grasshopper began splashing around, but he realized he wasn't burning. And that's when the master said, "Oh, Grasshopper, it's not acid. It's just water. We threw the bones in for special effects, that's all." So, what pushed little Grasshopper in? Fear. Fear pushed him in. For if he knew it was just water below him, he would have ran across it, just as he did in the courtyard. You see, in life, it's our fears, the what-ifs, doubts, and the uncontrollable that keeps us from reaching our full potential. But we mustn't let it. We mustn't let our struggles or society keep us confined. We shouldn't wait for life to unwind. We have to let go and exist undefined. And if we go looking for something to find, I hope we start with what's inside. So will you choose to see a pool of water? Or choose to see a pool of acid? Will you tell yourself tomorrow or next time or next year, or tell yourself today? Because if not now, then when? Will you choose to rely on others to make a difference, or choose to be the difference? Because if not you, then who? Will you walk your own path and look back on the footsteps you tracked with pride? Or will you continue to your last day living a lie? And what will you think the next time someone asks? Actually, I'm going to ask. Who are you? Thank you. I'm going to grab some water, but if anyone has any questions